So today we're opening the blueprints on a figure whose vision, I mean, it didn't just prefigure the modern age.
No, it really laid the conceptual foundations for it.
We are diving into the life and work of the English polymath, Charles Babbage.
I mean, it's really not an overstatement to call Babbage the original techno-prophet. He was so much more than just a brilliant mathematician or an inventor.
Right.
He was a mechanical engineer, a philosopher, a social critic.
And a political reformer.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
He approached every single problem in life, whether it was calculating orbits or, I don't know, dealing with street noise, with the same rigorous, data-driven methodology.
And that methodology is precisely why he carries the title we all associate with him today.
The father of the computer.
Exactly. He originated the core concepts of the digital programmable computer.
Yeah.
So our mission in this deep dive is to unpack those essential ideas, the architectural genius that we find in his designs for the Analytical Engine. But we can't stop there. We also need to dedicate some real time to exploring the surprisingly diverse range of his other interests.
Oh, absolutely.
Because they all illustrate his total, unwavering commitment to logic and efficiency, whether he was reforming economics or, designing the first computer printer.
The sheer scope of his intellectual ambition is what makes him such a compelling character. He was a man fighting the intellectual and the mechanical limitations of the 19th century,
right,
while conceptually he was living in the 21st.
Absolutely. And to kick things off, here's a critical nugget that just sets the stage for his whole legacy.
Okay.
Babbage designed not only the calculating machines, but also the very first computer printers.
Which is incredible on its own.
It is. They were intended to engrave the results directly onto metal plates, which would eliminate any chance of human error and transcription.
The whole system.
The whole system. But the truly remarkable part, the part that really justifies his visionary status, is this. Babbage died without ever completing his major designs, the difference engine and the analytical engine.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, decades, even a century later, functioning replicas were built. And this is the key. They were built using only the manufacturing tolerances and techniques available in the 1800s.
And that reconstruction effort, it proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that his designs were completely sound.
Right.
His failure wasn't a conceptual failure of engineering or logic. It was a failure of funding, of mechanical tolerances, and maybe just the political will of his time.
He was just too far ahead.
He's building too big, too complex, and way too far ahead of the industrial infrastructure that was available.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the context we have to hold as we look at his initial motivation, which really stemmed from a real national crisis, the crisis of error.
Okay, so let's unpack Babbage the man and the environment that forged this singular obsession with eliminating error. We know he was born in 1791.
Yep, confirmed by his baptism record from early the next year.
And what's immediately striking is that Babbage was not driven by the necessity of, earning a living.
Okay.
He was extremely well off.
That financial context is the bedrock of his entire career path. When his father died in 1827, Babbage inherited a considerable fortune. I think it was around 100,000 pounds.
Wow.
Which, if you translate it to today, is somewhere around $15 million.
So he had freedom.
Total financial freedom. And that allowed him to pursue these monumental, multi-decade projects that had no immediate market potential and that required constant, massive personal investment.
So he never had to compromise his vision.
Never. Not for commercial viability, not for bureaucratic demands,
right,
which, both enabled his genius and arguably complicated his ability to deliver a finished product.
And that freedom really allowed him to be intensely critical of the existing academic structures. Let's look at his time at Cambridge, first at Trinity, then Peterhouse, starting in 1810.
Right.
The sources all highlight that he was already light years ahead of the curriculum.
Oh, completely. He was self-taught in the most advanced mathematics of the day. He just devoured the works of continental figures like Joseph Louis Lagrange and the Italian scholar Maria Gaetana Agnesi.
So when he got to Cambridge,
he found the standard instruction disappointingly narrow and, frankly, outdated.
So why were they so behind? I mean, what was the academic stagnation he was reacting against?
Well, you have to understand, Britain had clung fiercely to the older Newtonian notation for calculus.
Okay.
While the rest of Europe, particularly France, had enthusiastically adopted the more flexible and powerful symbolic notation developed by Leibniz, Babbage saw this as a national embarrassment,
A roadblock.
a major roadblock to scientific progress.
Yeah.
The British mathematical establishment had become insular, resistant to change, and this fundamentally limited what they could even conceive of mathematically.
So in response to this, Babbage, along with a few key allies, took decisive action in 1812. They formed the Analytical Society.
The Analytical Society was a revolutionary group. He co-founded it with his contemporaries, the astronomer John Herschel and the mathematician George Peacock.
And their mission was explicit.
Explicitly, to reform British mathematics. And they tackled this practically, not just philosophically. They started translating French calculus texts. Their most important contribution was the English translation of Sylvestre Lacroix's calculus textbook.
And this wasn't just about updating notation, right? This was changing the intellectual architecture of British science.
It was. This movement fostered what became known as the British Lagrangian School, which began focusing heavily on powerful symbolic methods, things like formal power series, functional equations, operator methods.
Oh, so here's where we make that crucial conceptual connection. Why does a deep dive into abstract mathematical form matter for building a physical machine?
Because the calculation principles developed by this school, specifically those focused on generalized methods like difference equations, were the exact mathematical tools Babbage would later use as the core operating logic of his difference engine.
So he didn't just invent the machine. He and his friends had to fundamentally reform the mathematics that would run on the machine.
Precisely. They provided the theoretical foundation for mechanizing complex calculations. If you can define a problem using difference equations, you can reduce complex operations like squaring a number or finding a tangent into simple repetitive additions.
And that is the conceptual leap.
That's the entire leap that allows machinery to take over from human thought.
And what drove this desire to mechanize? The crisis of error. Let's explain for you, the listener, the real-world stakes of the early 1800s.
The stakes were incredibly high. This was the age of oceanic travel, of developing industry, advanced astronomy, and all these fields relied entirely on published mathematical, astronomical, and navigation tables.
Logarithms, cosines,
Out
primes.
of it, nautical almanacs. The problem was that these tables were notoriously, dangerously error-ridden.
And why the constant mistakes?
The production process was entirely manual. It relied on highly skilled, yet fallible, human workers called human computers. These workers would calculate the values, then transcribe them, then proofread them, and then a typesetter would set the printing plate.
So 4 stages for mistakes to creep in.
Exactly. And a single misplaced digit in a navigation table could cost a ship, a cargo, or a life. It was a national security, economic, and scientific problem.
The famous story of Babbage's aha moment highlights this perfectly. It's recounted that around 1812, he was working with John Herschel on one of these tables. And after checking and rechecking the figures, Babbage just threw down his pen in frustration and famously exclaimed, "I wish to God these calculations had been executed by steam."
That one moment, it just crystallized his life's work. He realized that the human element was the weak link.
And he also understood that complex calculation could be broken down.
Right. He looked at the work being done in France at the Bureau de Longitude under Gaspard de Prony. De Prony had hired 80 human computers and organized them like an assembly line.
So each person only did one small part.
A very small part. He restricted each person to only the simplest arithmetic, addition, and subtraction.
So de Prony proved that calculation could be industrialized. Babbage's genius was realizing that if the work could be reduced to these repetitive, simple steps,
then the labor could be taken over completely by machinery. Machinery that was quicker, tireless, and most importantly, immune to human fatigue or transcription error.
it's a perfect analogy. Industrialization applied not to textiles or iron, but to thought itself.
He wasn't replacing the thinking, he was replacing the drudgery of the execution.
And Babbage immediately tied this philosophical quest to the institutional scientific structure. In 1820, he co-founded the Royal Astronomical Society.
Initially called the Astronomical Society of London. And this was a pivotal move because the Society's original goals were directly linked to his mechanical agenda.
They wanted to standardize the data.
Exactly, to standardize and circulate astronomical calculation data. So by making the problem of error correction a core objective of the scientific community, he gave weight and urgency to his mechanical solution.
And the community recognized this.
They did. They awarded him the Society's Gold Medal in 1824, specifically for the idea of the calculating engine, before a single completed machine even existed.
So the stage was set, the mathematical theory was reformed, The political urgency was established, and the funding was secured. The goal was simple: eliminate human fallibility.
And that leads us directly to the mechanical realization of this vision, the monumental task of building the difference engine.
The difference engine number 1, which Babbage started developing in 1822, was his first major physical endeavor. It was a specialized machine, not a general computer.
Right, it was designed to do one thing brilliantly.
Which was?
It was a single-purpose calculator built to automatically compute polynomial functions. Now, for you, the listener who might be feeling a bit lost in the math here, when we talk about the method of finite differences, we're talking about a mathematical technique that simplifies a complex calculation.
Like a curve or a logarithm.
Exactly. It breaks it down into a series of iterative additions.
Could you give us a quick analogy for that?
Sure. Imagine you want to plot a complex, smooth curve like a parabola, but all you have is a ruler and the ability to add numbers.
Okay.
The method of differences breaks that smooth curve down into infinitesimally small, repeating straight-line segments. By calculating the difference between successive values in the curve, you only ever need to perform addition to find the next value in the series.
So it completely avoids multiplication and division.
It entirely avoids them, which are the most error-prone operations. The whole elegance of the machine rested on this clever avoidance of complex arithmetic.
And this elegance impressed the government. As we noted, they invested significantly. Babbage received an astonishing £17,000 in government funding.
A massive sum for the time for a scientific instrument.
Yet difference engine number 1 was never finished.
And this is the defining tragedy of Babbage's early career, this conflict between the scale of his design and the limits of contemporary engineering.
The precision required was just too high.
Far beyond what the 1820s industrial infrastructure could routinely provide.
We're talking about a mechanical beast here, aren't we?
Oh, a monstrous one. The incomplete first design would have contained an estimated 25,000 separate custom-made parts. It would have weighed 15 short tons and stood 8 feet high.
So Babbage wasn't just designing a machine, he was pioneering the tools to build the machine.
He had to. He needed unique, elaborate jigs and fixtures to achieve the required precision for the gears and the linkages.
And this need for custom tooling led to the major breakdown in the project, the conflict with his engineer, Joseph Clement.
It was a classic 19th century industrial dispute, and it was just exacerbated by the scale of the innovation. Clement was Babbage's primary engineer, a highly skilled machinist.
And the conflict was about costs and...
Two key issues, yeah. Spiraling costs, as Babbage continually refined the design, and the really contentious issue of tool ownership.
Oh.
Clement insisted that the elaborate custom-made machine tools, which were essential for the precision, belonged to him, not to the government project.
So when the money ran out?
When the government funding temporarily dried up and the partnership dissolved, Clement took the tools, and the project just stalled, never to be restarted.
It's an incredible illustration of how innovation relies not just on ideas, but on supply chains and industrial relationships.
Absolutely.
The difference engine number 1 was abandoned, but Babbage, being Babbage, immediately started designing a better version.
That's the mark of his resilience, isn't it? Between 1847 and 1849, he designed the blueprints for difference engine number 2.
And it was a big improvement.
Huge. It was smaller, faster, and used less than a third of the parts of the first design, about 8,000 parts. It was a testament to his refined engineering skill.
But he couldn't get funding.
He applied again, presented this superior, more elegant design, but the government, having already spent £17,000 on the first failure, politely declined.
So here we have this ultimate paradox. The conceptual genius who couldn't complete his work in his lifetime, which makes the modern proof of concept even more vital.
It's everything. The reconstruction of difference engine number 2 at the Science Museum in London is perhaps the most important validation of Babbage's entire life.
They started it in 1985.
And finished in 1991. The museum's team meticulously followed Babbage's original drawings, and, this is the crucial point, they used only 19th century manufacturing tolerances and techniques.
They wanted to answer that historical question, could he have built this?
And the answer was a resounding yes.
It worked.
It worked flawlessly. The machine successfully performed its first calculation, delivering results accurately to 31 digits.
Wow.
It proved that the technology existed, the design was perfect, and the only missing element in the 1840s had been the concentrated financial commitment and sustained engineering oversight that Babbage just struggled to maintain.
And let's not forget the ancillary inventions that came out of this. In 2000, the Science Museum completed the engine's printer.
Right, which was a critical and often overlooked part of Babbage's system.
It wasn't just an accessory.
No, it was fundamental to his core mission. If the whole point was to eliminate error, you couldn't trust a human typesetter to transcribe the final calculated number.
So the printer closed the loop.
Completely. Babbage's design automatically engraved the output onto a soft metal plate, ready for printing. It ensured the data generated by the reliable machine was recorded reliably.
A true predecessor of modern output devices.
Definitely.
And the influence of the difference engine, even in its fragmented state, extended directly into the 20th century. Tell us about Henry Prevost Babbage and the connection to the electronic age.
So Babbage's youngest surviving son, Henry Prevost, he dedicated himself to honoring his father's legacy after his death.
And he managed to build some pieces.
He created small demonstration pieces based on the difference engine #1 designs. They were highly simplified prototypes, but they kept the idea alive.
And one of those prototypes traveled across the ocean.
Indeed. One of Henry Prevost's demonstration pieces ended up at Harvard University. And there it was later discovered and studied by a pioneering American computer scientist named Howard H. Aiken.
Aiken was designing the Harvard Mark I.
Right, one of the earliest large-scale electromechanical computers in the 1940s. And Aiken explicitly cited Babbage's work as a foundational inspiration for his own architecture.
So the difference engine established the mechanical possibility of automatic calculation. But Babbage was already moving beyond calculation to pure generalized logic.
And that shift is arguably the most important pivot in the history of information technology. He moved from the specialist calculator to the universal machine.
This is the leap that earned Babbage his ultimate title. The Analytical Engine, which he began sketching around 1834, represents a complete shift in thinking.
Right. The difference engine was specialized. The Analytical Engine was designed for fully general-purpose computation.
This is where Babbage leaves the 19th century entirely and basically defines the 20th and 21st.
I mean, he really does. The Analytical Engine wasn't just a bigger calculator. It was a conceptually complete computer architecture. It was a succession of designs refined over decades that Babbage obsessed over until his death.
Let's focus on the architecture because this is the astonishing part. What features did the Analytical Engine incorporate that define every modern computer sitting on our desks or in our pockets today?
It used a conceptual split that is now completely standard, the separation of data and program memory.
Okay.
Babbage called the memory unit the store and the arithmetic processing unit the mill.
The store held the data, the mill did the work.
Exactly. The store held the numbers, and the mill was where the actual calculation, the arithmetic, took place. This is the CPU-RAM division we still use today.
And it also operated on instructions.
Yes, and it had a dedicated control unit that was capable of executing sequential control. So do step 1, then step 2, and so on. But here is the genuine revolution. Babbage designed it to handle conditional branching and looping.
Those concepts are so essential to programming logic. So for you, the listener, what do those terms mean in practice?
Looping means instructing the machine to repeat a sequence of instructions automatically without any human input until a condition is met. Think of performing the same calculation 50 times over.
Okay. And branching.
Conditional branching means the machine can make a decision. If this number is 0, go to instruction line 50. Otherwise, continue to instruction line 10.
It's logic.
It's pure logic. Those two concepts, looping and branching, are the absolute building blocks of every complex algorithm and software program. Without them, you only have arithmetic. With them, you have programming.
So if we connect all these features, the store, the mill, the control unit, the looping branching to the bigger picture, it means the Analytical Engine would have been the first mechanical device to be, in principle, Turing complete.
That is the ultimate designation.
It's huge.
Turing completeness, named after Alan Turing, is the theoretical property that defines a universal computer. If a device is Turing complete, it has the theoretical capacity to solve any computational problem that any modern electronic computer can solve.
Provided it has infinite time and memory.
Exactly. And Babbage designed a machine built of brass gears and steam that possessed this universal theoretical capability decades before the mathematics to describe that capability even existed.
It's absolutely mind-boggling. And the physical manifestation of the program was the punched card system.
That was the genius of his innovation. He borrowed heavily from a contemporary piece of manufacturing technology, the Jacquard loom.
Right, for weaving.
The Jacquard loom used a loop of stiff, heavy cards with holes punched into them to dictate these intricate weaving patterns automatically. Babbage realized these cards could be repurposed as a machine's software.
So one set of cards for data, one for instructions.
Yep, one for the numerical data and another set for the operational instructions.
The loom analogy is so powerful because it shows that separation of the abstract instruction set from the physical machine doing the work. Babbage wasn't just designing the hardware, he was creating the first operating system.
He was, and he wrote actual programs for this engine between 1837 and 1840. He worked out the complex sequences of operations needed to carry out sophisticated mathematical tasks.
Which brings us to his most famous and perhaps most important collaborator, Ada Lovelace.
Right. Lovelace, the daughter of Lord Byron, was a brilliant mathematician in her own right, who corresponded extensively with Babbage. Her contribution is just central to the history of programming.
And her major public work was related to Babbage's 1840 lectures in Turin, Italy.
Exactly. Babbage, often frustrated by the lack of official recognition and funding in Britain, went abroad to explain his ideas. An Italian military engineer and mathematician, Luigi Menabrea, took detailed notes and published them in French.
And Lovelace was tasked with translating Menabrea's notes into English.
But Babbage explicitly asked her to add an appendix of her own. These were her famous notes A through G, which expanded significantly on his concepts.
And it was in Note G where she really cemented her legacy.
She did. She developed this complex sequence of steps, an algorithm explicitly designed to enable the analytical engine to calculate a series of Bernoulli numbers.
Which is not a simple task.
Not at all. This algorithm showed the full potential of the machine to handle complex iterative tasks, moving far beyond mere arithmetic. This comprehensive computational plan is why she is rightly heralded as the first computer programmer.
She saw past the numbers to the symbolic potential, didn't she? She captured it in her famous analogy.
That the analytical engine weaves algebraical patterns just as the Jacquard loom weaves flowers and leaves.
It's poetic, but also deeply scientific.
It is. She understood that the machine was not restricted to calculating numerical values. It could manipulate any symbols, whether they represented numbers or musical notes or algebraic variables, according to a set of rules.
That's the definition of a universal symbol manipulator.
Which is precisely what modern computing is built on.
Yet, despite this prophetic design and this amazing programming, the machine remained perpetually unfinished. A masterpiece of theoretical engineering.
A masterpiece of paper and brass, yeah.
Yeah.
Babbage continually refined the designs until his death, often tearing down early models or concepts when a more elegant solution presented itself.
Which is admirable, but
that habit of constant revision, while intellectually admirable, definitely contributed to his inability to ever deliver a finished, fully operational machine.
And the unfinished nature of his work has inspired modern homage like the 2011 Plan 28 project.
Plan 28 is a group of British engineers and researchers dedicated to finally building the analytical engine based on Babbage's most refined designs.
And it forces us to confront the physical reality of what he was designing.
It really does. When you look at the estimated specifications, they are staggering for a mechanical device.
Give us some of those specs.
Okay, so the machine was estimated to require about 1,500 rods and 5,000 wheels for just one column of the register.
Wow.
Overall, the memory was estimated to have the equivalent capacity of about 675 bytes.
That's bytes, not kilobytes or megabytes.
Bytes, yeah, and the entire mechanical process would run at a clock speed about 7 hertz. So conceptually, a modern computer, but physically a massive, slow-grinding brass behemoth.
It just puts into perspective what a monumental achievement this design was, using only the materials of the 1840s.
For sure.
So Babbage designed the conceptual framework, but we've established he wasn't just about the mechanics of calculating. Here's where it gets really interesting. We turn to the sheer breadth of Charles Babbage, the eccentric, the economist, the philosopher, and the reformer.
Right.
Let's start with his position at Cambridge, where we already noted his frustration with the academic environment. From 1828 to 1839, Babbage held the most prestigious academic title in Britain.
Lucasian Professor of Mathematics.
The same chair held by Isaac Newton and later Stephen Hawking.
And famously, Babbage never gave a single lecture during his entire 11-year tenure.
Which was controversial, to say the least.
Oh, yeah.
So why accept the chair if he didn't intend to lecture?
He saw the role not as a lecturing position, but as a platform for reform and for research. Babbage was just out of step with many of his colleagues.
He wanted a broader curriculum.
A broader syllabus, greater inclusion of modern science, a stronger emphasis on research over rote teaching. Figures like his predecessor, George Biddle Airy, and his colleague William Whewell often opposed his non-conventional methods.
So he just did his own thing.
He believed his energy was better spent solving profound scientific problems, like building his engines, than repeating established material to undergraduates.
He definitely preferred the dynamism of London. He was an incredibly important social figure, often credited with importing the scientific soirée from France.
And turning his Marylebone home into an intellectual hub. His Saturday evening gatherings were legendary.
They were true intellectual mixing pots.
Absolutely. Bringing together the aristocracy, political leaders, military figures, and the scientific elite. It reflected Babbage's core belief that science shouldn't be confined to dusty university halls.
It should be central to public life.
Exactly. Central to public, political, and economic life.
And this desire to integrate science into public life led him to attempt to enter formal politics. He stood for Parliament twice.
For the borough of Finsbury, a known reform-minded area, in 1832 and 1834.
He was a genuine reformer.
He was, but politically unsuccessful. His platform included some pretty radical ideas for the time. He advocated for the disestablishment of the Church of England. He wanted a much broader political franchise.
So more people voting.
Yeah, giving more people the vote. And he strongly pushed for the inclusion of manufacturers and industrialists as key stakeholders in political decision-making.
So why did a reformer fail in a reform-minded borough?
Well, in 1832, he split the critical reform vote and came in third out of 5 candidates. In 1834, he finished dead last.
Oh.
Yeah. While his ideas were progressive, his personality was, let's say, difficult. He was famously demanding, intensely focused, and maybe lacking the patience and charm required for political compromise.
An intellectual purist seeking political office.
And it seems the political machine was simply too messy for his rigorous standards.
But if he failed in the political arena, he certainly succeeded in applying his scientific rigor to the industrial world. He published his 1832 book on the economy of machinery and manufactures.
And this is considered an extremely influential early work of operational research. This book was Babbage applying the scientific method directly to the factory floor.
It detailed the organization of industrial production.
And it is where he established his most famous economic contribution, known as the Babbage Principle.
Okay, we need to slow down here and explain this clearly. How did the Babbage Principle differ from the standard division of labor that Adam Smith advocated for?
So Adam Smith, in The Wealth of Nations, focused on how the division of labor increases productivity because workers become highly specialized and skilled at one task.
Right, speeding up the production rate?
Babbage agreed with that, but his insight went deeper into cost minimization.
So it was about the efficiency of labor cost?
Precisely. Babbage noted that in any industrial process, skilled, highly paid workers inevitably spend some of their time performing tasks that are actually below their skill level.
Tasks that someone less trained could easily do.
Exactly. The commercial advantage, Babbage argued, wasn't just maximizing output, but minimizing cost by ensuring that expensive, high-skill workers are assigned only high-skill tasks.
And all the lower-skill, repetitive tasks should be systematically identified and relegated to lower-paid employees.
So if you're paying a master machinist 10 shillings a day, you don't want him spending time tightening a simple bolt that an apprentice earning 6p could do.
Right.
Babbage showed how this systematic matching of skill to required effort provided a massive, often hidden commercial advantage. It essentially quantified the economic benefits of skill stratification in a way that Smith hadn't.
And this principle profoundly influenced later generations, for better or worse.
Well, for sure. It became an inherent assumption underlying the entire field of scientific management, pioneered by Frederick Winslow Taylor in the late 19th and early 20th centuries.
The pursuit of maximum industrial efficiency.
Through time and motion studies, yeah. Even Karl Marx, despite his fundamental disagreement with Babbage's capitalist motivations, he acknowledged the Babbage principle.
What did Marx say?
He noted that this division of labor was driven strictly by the pursuit of profitability and the degradation of individual craft, rather than an increase in overall productivity.
And Babbage also used that same book as a platform for reform, didn't he? Exposing the restrictive practices of the book publishing industry.
He did. He saw them as a cartel, and he fought for more transparent and fairer pricing structures. He was a data-driven reformer who targeted inefficiency wherever he saw it, mathematics, politics, or commerce.
Let's shift now from economics to philosophy and theology. In 1837, Babbage published the Ninth Bridgewater Treatise. This sounds like he was picking a fight with the established religious scientific community.
He was, intellectually. The original 8 Bridgewater treatises were commissioned to explore natural theology, the idea of proving God's existence and wisdom through the study of nature.
And Babbage felt they weren't doing a good job.
He felt the existing works failed to use modern science effectively.
So what was Babbage's main theological argument?
He argued strongly for uniformitarianism, the idea of a divine legislator who created the world through fixed natural laws. Babbage preferred this concept over the notion of a God who required continuous intervention or miracles to maintain creation.
Why did a mechanical engineer prefer this model of God?
Because it mirrored his own work. He believed in a creation where the initial programming, the laws of physics, was perfect and self-sustaining, operating predictably once set in motion.
So studying science was a pure form of worship.
In a way, yes. This meant that studying the works of the creator science and data offered a more satisfactory and robust proof of God's existence than evidence transmitted through human testimony, like Scripture.
Which he saw as subject to human fallibility.
Exactly, like his dreaded error-ridden tables. He stressed, crucially, that science and Scripture were not in conflict, but that science offered the more reliable, data-backed path to understanding the divine structure.
That is the ultimate elevation of data over historical anecdote. And this philosophical treatise is where we find his most imaginative and profound concept, the library in the air.
This is truly a beautiful and terrifying piece of poetic science.
Explain it for us.
Babbage proposed that because every spoken word or physical action causes atomic vibrations and disruptions in the air and in the environment, these effects are never truly lost. They are simply disseminated and recorded.
He envisioned a complete, permanent, atomic record of human history.
Exactly. He wrote that the air itself is one vast library on whose pages are forever written all that man has ever said or woman whispered.
Wow.
He conceived of an indelible record of every human action, a universal database of ethics and physics. It's an astonishing predecessor to our modern concerns about digital footprints and universal surveillance, framed as a theological certainty.
That obsession with permanent, precise data also led him into the realm of code breaking, another area where his genius was ahead of its public recognition.
Right. Babbage was a proficient code breaker, particularly during the Crimean War era in the 1850s. He successfully broke both the Vigenère AutoKey cipher and the simpler Vigenère cipher.
And for those unfamiliar with it, what was the Vigenère cipher?
The Vigenère cipher was often called le chiffre indéchiffrable, the unbreakable cipher.
Because it used a keyword.
It used a keyword to shift letters, creating a very complex substitution that seemed impossible to crack without the key. Babbage's breakthrough involved recognizing that even with a shifting key, the patterns and the frequency of letter repetition could be detected using mathematical analysis.
But his work was classified as a military secret.
Never published, and so he lost credit. Tragically so. For well over a century, the credit for discovering the mathematical method for solving it was given to the Prussian officer Friedrich Kasiski, who made the discovery independently some years later.
And Babbage's priority wasn't established until when?
Not until 1985. That's when his original work was discovered, confirming another instance where his intellectual achievements just lay dormant for decades.
Now, let's pivot to perhaps the most peculiar and colorful element of his public life, his notorious lifelong campaign against public nuisances.
This is Babbage the eccentric, driven to distraction by imperfection and noise.
Right, because he believed intellectual labor was paramount.
Anything that disrupted it was treated as an economic catastrophe. He became infamous for his vehement campaigns against street noise, specifically targeting organ grinders.
He viewed the organ grinder not as a charming nuisance, but as a destructive force.
Exactly. He argued that they inflicted misery upon thousands of persons and the absolute pecuniary penalty imposed upon multitudes of intellectual workers by the loss of their time.
So he saw the loss of an hour of his computational thought as a quantifiable, destructive economic event.
He even meticulously documented this obsession, tallying 165 separate nuisance events over an 80-day period.
He even took legal action against them, didn't he? Earning him the nickname, the Avenger of the Intellectuals.
It's an amazing blend of high-minded principles and petty personal annoyance. And this obsession with quantifying the mundane extended to everything. My personal favorite anecdote involves his data collection on broken glass.
Oh, this is great.
In 1857, he published a literal table, the relative frequency of the causes of breakage of plate glass windows.
A table just for broken windows.
A meticulous table. He categorized the cause of 464 broken panes. He noted which were caused by hailstones, which by stones thrown by children, which by carts.
And my favorite detail.
And in a classic Babbage detail, he recorded that 14 of those pains were caused specifically by drunken men, women, or boys. He couldn't help himself. Every event, no matter how random, was a data point awaiting analysis.
Before we wrap up this polymath section, let's quickly acknowledge his other non-computing inventions that had a direct practical impact.
Right. He was a genuine mechanical innovator outside the calculating world. Around 1838, he invented the pilot, what Americans call the cow catcher.
The V-shaped metal frame on the front of locomotives.
Designed to clear the track of obstacles like stray livestock or debris, it drastically increased railway safety.
And in the medical field.
He invented the ophthalmoscope, the device still used by doctors today to examine the interior of the eye.
But he never got credit for it at the time.
He gave his prototype to a doctor named Thomas Wharton Jones for testing, who unfortunately ignored it. It fell into obscurity until it was independently reinvented and popularized by Hermann von Helmholtz.
Once again, Babbage was right and years ahead of the curve.
You see the pattern.
So he invented the conceptual framework for modern computing, the first computer printer, a key railway safety device, a major diagnostic medical tool, formalized a fundamental principle of industrial economics, and broke the unbreakable code all while battling itinerant street musicians. That is a life of boundless intellectual energy.
Absolutely.
Charles Babbage died in 1871 in London, having spent over 40 years fighting for his grand, never-finished mechanical visions. We have one unique and rather macabre final fact about his physical legacy that we need to share.
Yes, the persistence of his family in documenting his life is remarkable. His original autopsy report was actually discovered and published in 1983 by his great-great-grandson.
Which is incredible. But the most striking physical memorial is the preservation of his mind itself.
That's right. A portion of Babbage's brain is preserved at the Hunterian Museum, and the other half is on display at the Science Museum in London.
It's an incredibly fitting yet unsettling tribute. A physical memorial to a man whose greatest achievements were entirely conceptual and intellectual.
They really were.
However, the conceptual legacy, of course, is what truly endures. His impact is everywhere.
The Charles Babbage Institute is a major archive and research center for the history of computing. His name was given to a 1970s programming language.
And he remains an iconic figure in steampunk fiction.
Because his brass, steam-driven vision of computing is so aesthetically compelling, the future envisioned through the mechanics of the past.
So if we step back and summarize the key takeaways, Babbage's life is defined by this fundamental conflict.
He was the engineer whose vast mechanical visions just outpaced 19th century manufacturing and government funding.
Yet whose designs laid the complete, functional, conceptual framework for modern, general-purpose computation.
Yeah.
His belief system, derived from his mathematical passion, was driven by a powerful, almost religious belief in precision, the sanctity of data, and the absolute necessity of eliminating human error from the record.
He believed in a world governed by predictable, God-given natural law, operating without divine intervention once it was set in motion.
And he proposed the library in the air, a permanent atomic record of all human actions, implying that every choice had an unavoidable, objective, and permanent consequence.
He was, above all, an architect of certainty in an age of analog uncertainty.
So, given Babbage's lifelong drive to mechanize knowledge and ensure this high degree of precision, we are left with a final, provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over. If Charles Babbage, the relentless quantifier and purist of data, were alive today, which side of the computing revolution would capture his attention and his passion most profoundly?
Would he be utterly fascinated by the physical reality, the fulfillment of his engineering vision? The powerful microchip-driven computers, the terabytes of memory, the massive processing power built directly upon his mill and store concepts, finally realizing the speed and precision he dreamed of.
Or, given his obsession with error elimination and his concept of the permanent record, would he be horrified and philosophically challenged by the ethical implications of the constant, overwhelming, and potentially error-filled flood of data that humanity now digitally generates and records every single second?
The intentional misinformation, the algorithmic bias, the noise.
That's the question Babbage's rigorous yet unfulfilled life poses for our hyper-digital, data-drenched age.
A truly enduring dilemma from the man who gave us the machine.
We'll catch you on the next Deep Dive.